The last thing I saw before everything went dark was my brother's terrified face, illuminated by oncoming headlights. Sometimes I wonder if that image was worth the price of admission to my new life. My name is Kira, and I used to be an artist. Used to be. That was before my brother Brent decided to drive us home from my gallery opening after downing half a bottle of whiskey. I knew he was drunk. I should have called an Uber, but he was my big brother, my protector, or so I thought. "Come on, Kiki, don't be such a buzzkill," he'd said, dangling his keys. "It's your big night. Let me drive my baby sister home." The crash happened so fast. Metal crunching, glass shattering, then darkness. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about severe trauma to my optical nerve, permanent damage, complete loss of vision. My mother Ruby's perfume filled the room as she squeezed my hand. "How's Brent?" I asked, my throat raw. "He's okay, sweetheart, just a few scratches." Her voice cracked. "He feels terrible." "Where is he?" Silence. "He's meeting with the family lawyer," my father Christian finally answered. "We need to handle this, delicately." That's when I knew. Even before I heard them whispering in the hallway later that night, thinking I was asleep. "We can't let this destroy his future," my mother insisted. "He's up for partner at the firm. If this gets out, the family name would be ruined." My father agreed. "We'll handle the medical bills quietly. Kira will understand. She always does." I lay there in the dark, feeling the bandages around my eyes grow wet with tears. They were right about one thing. I did understand. I understood perfectly that in their eyes, I would always be second best to Brent. The next few months were a blur of rehabilitation and therapy, learning to navigate with a cane, reading Braille, adapting to a world without color or light. My parents hired the best specialists, paid for the finest care, anything to ease their guilt, I suppose. Brent visited exactly once. "I'm so sorry, Kiki," he mumbled, reeking of alcohol even then. "I'll make it up to you somehow." I smiled and told him it was okay. What else could I do? He was the golden child, after all, the one who needed protecting. But something changed in me that day. As I sat there listening to him stumble through his apology, I made a promise to myself. I would never be anyone's victim again. Never be the one who understands while others walked all over me. Rose, my best friend since college, was the only one who truly got it. She visited every day, helping me learn to use screen readers and voice commands on my computer. "You're still you," she'd say fiercely. "Still brilliant, still capable. Don't let them make you feel less than." Jordan, our family attorney, started dropping by too. At first, I thought he was checking on me for my parents. But during one visit, he lowered his voice and said something that changed everything. "Your father's company. There's something you should know about the structure, about who really controls what." I leaned forward, suddenly alert. "Tell me more." That conversation planted the seed. While my family assumed I was focusing on adjusting to my new reality, I was learning, planning, preparing. They thought blindness would make me helpless. They were wrong. In the dark, other senses become sharper. You learn to hear what people aren't saying, to feel the currents of power and weakness. 6 years passed. I built my own business, learned to thrive in my world of shadows. My parents called occasionally, always careful to keep things surface level pleasant. Brent went on with his charmed life, making partner at his firm, burning through relationships and money with equal abandon. Then yesterday, my phone buzzed with an email from him. "Kiki, I need your help. Everything's falling apart. Can we talk?" I ran my fingers over my phone's screen as it read his message aloud, a smile spreading across my face. The moment I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. "Emma," I called to my assistant, "please tell my brother he's welcome to visit this weekend. And Emma, make sure to mention that I have some exciting news to share with him." I heard her typing the response, unaware of the wheels already turning in my head. My brother was about to learn what I'd discovered in the darkness, that karma might be blind, but she always collects her debts. "Ms. Kira, your 9 a.m. is here." Emma's voice came through the intercom. Even after 3 years as my assistant, she maintained that formal tone during business hours. "Send her in." I straightened in my chair, hearing the confident click of heels approaching. Looking sharp as always, Rose announced herself, making me laugh. Our inside joke never got old. How would you know? I could be wearing pajamas. Please, Emma would never let you leave the house in anything less than perfect condition. Rose settled into the chair across from my desk. So, Brent finally crawled out of his hole? I nodded, my fingers trailing over the raised dots on the document in front of me. He's coming this weekend. Apparently he's in some kind of trouble. Financial trouble. Jordan's voice joined us. I hadn't heard him enter. He'd learned to move quietly in deference to my enhanced hearing. Your brother's firm is hemorrhaging clients. 3 sexual harassment complaints in the last year alone. Shocking, Rose muttered. The Golden Boy's finally tarnishing. I remembered the day Jordan helped me set everything in motion. We'd sat in this same office, plotting how to acquire controlling shares in my father's company through a series of shell corporations and blind trusts. Your father never imagined you'd understand business, Jordan had said. That's his weakness. Now, 4 years later, I controlled 51% of Whitney Enterprises. My father still thought he was in charge, while Brent remained blissfully unaware that his trust fund was nearly depleted. Emma, I called out, can you bring in the latest quarterly reports? As Emma's heels clicked across the floor, Rose leaned forward. Are you really going through with this? Watch me, I smiled, knowing the irony of my words. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. I'd built my own consulting firm from scratch, specializing in corporate restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on me, a blind woman helping others see their way through business challenges. That evening, as I sat in my penthouse apartment, my phone buzzed. Kiki? Brent's voice was strained. Just wanted to confirm for this weekend. Of course, big brother. Emma will send a car for you. I can drive myself. No. The word came out sharper than intended. You've done enough driving for both of us, don't you think? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Right. He finally mumbled. Sorry. After hanging up, I called Rose. Everything's set, she reported. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday morning. Jordan has all the paperwork ready. And my parents? Your mother's been calling everyone she knows, trying to secure a loan for Brent. Your father's still clueless about the company ownership. I walked to my window, feeling the evening sun on my face. My fingertips found the glass, cool and smooth. Somewhere out there, my family was about to learn that their perfect world was built on shifting sand. Ms. Kira? Emma's voice was gentle. Your dinner's ready, and I've laid out your outfit for tomorrow's meeting with the investors. Thank you, Emma. I turned from the window. Any messages from my mother? 3. She asked about having dinner next week. She also mentioned that your father's birthday is coming up. I smiled. Tell her I'm terribly busy. Send the usual gift to father, something expensive and impersonal. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone read out an email from Jordan. Final verification complete. All assets are in place. Operation is go for Monday. Are you sure about this? My fingers flew over the phone's screen. Absolutely. Time to show them that justice isn't the only thing that's blind. I thought about Brent, probably drinking himself to sleep in his overpriced apartment. About my mother, still making excuses for him after all these years. About my father, who chose family reputation over his daughter's justice. My phone buzzed again, Rose checking in. You okay? Never better, I replied, just thinking about how much can change in a weekend. Need me there when Brent arrives? No, this is something I need to do alone. I paused. But stay close to your phone. Always. And Kira, remember, you're not that scared girl in the hospital anymore. No, I wasn't. That girl died the night they chose Brent over justice. In her place rose someone stronger, someone who learned to see clearly in the dark. As I drifted off to sleep, I smiled, thinking of Brent's upcoming visit. He had no idea he was walking into a trap 6 years in the making. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served blind. The doorbell chimed at exactly 2 p.m. Emma's heels clicked across the floor to answer it, and I heard my brother's familiar shuffling gait. Kiki? His voice was smaller than I remembered. You look amazing. Wish I could say the same. I kept my tone light, gesturing toward the living room. Emma, please bring us some coffee. Brent's shoes, expensive Italian leather by the sound, scraped against my hardwood floors as he followed me. He smelled of stale cigarettes and desperate nights, a far cry from his usual designer cologne. "This place is incredible," he said, settling onto my sofa. "The view must be—" He caught himself. "I mean, the view is spectacular, or so I'm told. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows. I paid extra for it, actually." I smiled. Ironic, isn't it? Emma returned with the coffee, and I heard the gentle clink of china as she set it down. "Will there be anything else, Ms. Kira?" "That's all, Emma. Take the rest of the day off." Once we were alone, Brent cleared his throat. "Look, Kiki, about why I'm here. You need money." I sipped my coffee. "How much?" "3 million. He exhaled heavily. "The firm. There were some complaints, settlements. Then clients started leaving." "And the trust fund?" "Gone." His voice cracked. "Dad doesn't know yet. Mom's been trying to help, but—" I set down my cup, hearing it click perfectly into the saucer. "Remember when I was in the hospital? When you visited that one time?" "Kiki, please. You said you'd make it up to me somehow." I leaned forward. "Did you mean it?" "Of course I did. I've carried that guilt every day." "Guilt?" I laughed. "Is that what you call it? Drinking yourself stupid every night, harassing women at your firm, burning through Dad's money?" The sofa creaked as he shifted uncomfortably. "How do you know about—" "I know everything, Brent. Every settlement, every NDC, every penny you've squandered." I stood, walking to the window. "Did you know I own this entire building?" "What?" "The building, the consulting firm. 3 others like it across the country." I turned to face him. "Turns out being blind makes people underestimate you. They never see you coming." His breathing had quickened. "Kiki, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I can help you, big brother. But first, we need to discuss Monday's board meeting." "What board meeting?" The door opened, and Jordan's measured footsteps entered the room. "The Whitney Enterprises quarterly board meeting," he said. "Hello, Brent." "Jordan, what are you doing here?" "Helping your sister prepare some documents." Papers rustled. "Documents that will determine the future of the company." Brent stood up so quickly his coffee cup clattered. "What the hell is going on?" "Sit down," I said quietly. "It's time you learned what I've been doing these past 6 years while you were busy destroying everything Dad built." Jordan laid out the papers, and I heard the scratch of his pen as he marked signing spots. "Your sister," he explained, "has acquired controlling interest in Whitney Enterprises through a series of perfectly legal transactions." "That's impossible," Brent whispered. "Dad would never—" "Dad doesn't know," I cut in. "Yet. He will on Monday when I announce the company's new direction, and your role in it." "My role?" "You have 2 choices, Brent. Sign these papers, agreeing to enter a rehabilitation program and accept a position under my direct supervision, or face the consequences of your actions at the firm. All of them." The silence stretched thin enough to snap. "You're blackmailing me?" His voice trembled with rage. "Your own brother?" "No, I'm offering you salvation, more than you ever offered me." He stood again, pacing. "Does Mom know about this?" "Mom's too busy trying to save you to see what's coming." I smiled. "Rather like old times, isn't it?" "I'll tell Dad." "You'll tell him what?" Jordan interjected. "That you've bankrupted yourself? That you're facing multiple harassment suits? That you need $3 million to stay out of legal trouble?" Brent's pacing stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Defeated. "What do you want me to sign?" I gestured to Jordan, who slid the papers across the coffee table. As Brent's pen scratched against paper, I felt a flutter of something. Not quite satisfaction, not quite pity. "Welcome to your new life, big brother." I turned back to the window I couldn't see. "I hope you learned to navigate it better than I did." After they left, I called Rose. "It's done," I said. "Phase 1 complete." "How do you feel?" I thought about Brent's broken voice, about the years of darkness, about Monday's coming storm. "Ask me again after the board meeting." Monday morning arrived with the sharp tap of Emma's heels and the scent of premium coffee. "Your suit is laid out, Ms. Kira. Black Armani, red silk blouse. The car will be here in 40 minutes. "Any word from my parents?" "Your mother called twice. She's concerned about Brent's behavior since Saturday." I smiled, adjusting my watch. "I imagine she is." The boardroom at Whitney Enterprises hummed with whispered conversations as I entered. Jordan's steady hand guided me to my seat, not the visitor's chair they'd expected, but the head of the table. "What's the meaning of this?" My father's voice boomed from the doorway. "Kira, why are you sitting there?" "Good morning, Dad." I gestured to the seat on my right. "Please join us. Brent, you're on my left." "Now see here," Dad started, but Jordan cut him off. "Mr. Whitney, I suggest you sit down. Your daughter has some rather important information to share." The leather chair creaked as my father settled in. I could smell Mom's signature perfume as she hovered nearby, probably standing behind Dad's chair like always. "First," I began, "I'd like to introduce myself properly to the board. I'm Kira Whitney, majority shareholder of Whitney Enterprises, with 51% controlling interest." The room erupted in chaos. Above the noise, I heard my father's fist slam the table. "Impossible! I never sold—" "No, you didn't," Jordan interrupted, passing out documents. "But over the past 6 years, through various subsidiaries and strategic purchases, your daughter acquired controlling interest. All perfectly legal, I assure you." "You can't do this," Mom's voice quavered. "We're family." "Family?" I kept my voice level. "Like when you were family to me after the accident? When you chose to protect Brent instead of seeking justice?" "That was different," Brent began. "Quiet." The word cracked like a whip. "You signed away your right to protest on Saturday, remember?" More murmuring from the board members. I heard papers rustling as they reviewed the documents. "As my first act as majority shareholder," I continued, "I'm announcing several changes. First, a complete audit of all company finances, particularly focusing on certain personal expenses that have been charged to corporate accounts." Dad's sharp intake of breath told me he understood the implications. Second, a restructuring of senior management. "Dad, you'll be transitioning to an advisory role. Brent will be entering a rehabilitation program, after which he'll work under strict supervision in our community outreach division." "You can't demote me," Dad sputtered. "I built this company." "And I saved it," I countered. "The audit will show how Brent's legal troubles and your creative accounting have been bleeding us dry. Would you prefer I take this public?" Silence fell heavy in the room. "Jordan, please continue distributing the new organizational charts. You'll notice several positions have been eliminated or restructured." "Kira," Mom's voice was pleading now, "think about what you're doing to this family." "I have thought about it. For 6 years, 3 months, and 12 days. Ever since I lay in that hospital bed and heard you choose Brent over me." "That's not fair," Brent protested weakly. "Fair?" I turned toward his voice. "Was it fair when you got behind the wheel drunk? When you took my sight and faced zero consequences? When Mom and Dad protected you while I learned to live in darkness?" The boardroom remained silent except for the sound of shuffling papers and uncomfortable shifting in chairs. "The changes outlined in these documents take effect immediately," Jordan announced. "Any board member wishing to contest these changes is welcome to review our legal documentation or tender their resignation." "And if we refuse?" Dad's voice had lost its boom, sounding old and tired. "Then I'll take this company public," I said simply. "I'm sure the shareholders would be very interested in how their investments have been managed, not to mention the press." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "We'll reconvene tomorrow to begin the transition. Emma will send you all the details. Dad, Brent, Mom, I expect you to stay for a private discussion." As the board members filed out, I heard my mother's muffled sobs, my father's heavy breathing, Brent's restless shifting. "Well," I said once we were alone, "shall we discuss our new family dynamic?" "How long have you been planning this?" Dad asked, his voice hollow. "Since the day you chose to protect the family name instead of fighting for justice for your daughter." I smiled. Turns out darkness is an excellent teacher of patience. The silence that followed was deafening. My revenge was only beginning, but already I could taste its bittersweet victory. Sometimes the best way to make people see is to leave them in the dark. "I think we should have dinner," Mom announced, breaking the tense silence in the boardroom. "As a family, tonight." "Wonderful idea," I replied, my fingers trailing along the edge of the table. "My place, 7 o'clock. Emma will send the details." "Your place?" Dad's voice was gruff. "Why not the house? You remember the house, don't you?" "Oh, I remember everything about the house, Dad. The 23 steps up to my old bedroom, the sound of Brent stumbling in drunk at 3 a.m., the whispered conversations about how to handle my situation. Later that evening, the elevator opened to my penthouse. Emma had outdone herself. I could smell roasted lamb and fresh bread. "Your family has arrived," she murmured, helping me with my jacket. "Thank you, Emma. You can go home now." "Are you sure? I could stay." "I've got this." My family's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. Dad's heavy tread, Mom's nervous clicks, Brent's shuffling gait. "Dinner's ready," I announced, leading them to the dining room. "I hope everyone's hungry." "This is quite a place you have," Dad said, his chair scraping against the floor. "Yes, blindness has been surprisingly profitable." I smiled, lifting my wine glass. "To family reunions." No one joined my toast. "How can you be so cold?" Mom burst out. "We raised you better than this." "Did you?" I set down my glass. "Let's talk about how you raised me, about how quickly you switched from, 'we'll get through this together,' to 'we need to protect Brent's future.'" "We were trying to protect both of you," Dad insisted. "Really? Then why didn't we press charges? Why didn't we sue the bar that kept serving him drinks? Why did you let him walk away without consequences while I learned to read Braille?" Silverware clattered as Brent dropped his fork. "I said I was sorry." "Sorry?" I laughed. "Sorry is what you say when you step on someone's toe, not when you destroy their life and get away with it because Mommy and Daddy cleaned up your mess." "That's enough." Dad's fist hit the table. "You've made your point with this corporate takeover. What more do you want?" "What do I want?" I stood slowly. "I want you to feel what I felt. The helplessness, the betrayal, the darkness." "We never betrayed you," Mom whispered. "No? Then why did you refinance your house to pay Brent's legal settlements? Why did you empty your retirement account to cover his gambling debts? Why was it always him?" Silence fell, broken only by Mom's quiet sobs. "How do you know all this?" Dad asked. "I've had years to investigate, to follow the money, to uncover every secret you thought was safely buried." I turned toward Brent's breathing. "Did you tell them about the women at the firm, brother dear? About the NDAs? About what really happened to their money?" "Brent?" Mom's voice shook. "What is she talking about?" I can explain." "He can't explain," I cut in. "But the documents can. Jordan?" Right on cue, Jordan entered the dining room. "I have the files you requested, Kira." "Pass them around. I think it's time for some light reading." Papers rustled. Mom gasped. Dad's breathing grew heavy. "My God, Brent," he whispered. "What have you done?" "What you taught him to do," I answered. "Take what he wants and expect others to clean up his mess." "We never," Mom started. "Save it." I stood again. "Here's what's going to happen. Brent starts rehab tomorrow. Dad, you'll transition your duties to the new CEO next week. Mom, you'll stop enabling both of them." "Or what?" Dad's voice had lost all its authority. "Or I'll release everything. The accident report, the payoffs, the settlements, the embezzlement, everything." "You'd destroy your own family?" Mom asked. "You destroyed this family the night you chose him over justice." I moved to the window, feeling the cool glass under my fingers. "I'm just making it official." Chairs scraped as they stood. I heard Mom's stifled sobs, Dad's heavy sighs, Brent's unsteady steps. "Jordan will see you out," I said. "Oh, and Mom, don't bother calling tomorrow to guilt trip me. Emma has strict instructions about family calls." After they left, I poured another glass of wine. My phone buzzed. Rose. "How did it go?" "Exactly as expected. They're broken, but still in denial." "And how do you feel?" I thought about Mom's sobs, Dad's defeated voice, Brent's silence. "Ask me again when this is over." "And when will that be?" I smiled into the darkness. "When they finally see what I've seen all along, that sometimes the darkest truth is the one staring right at you." The rehab center's waiting room smelled of antiseptic and broken promises. I sat waiting for Brent's first family session, Rose beside me for support. "He's been here 2 weeks," the counselor said, settling into her chair. "I'm Dr. Sarah, and I must say, your brother has made some interesting revelations." The door opened, and I heard Brent's footsteps. steadier now, without the telltale shuffle of someone perpetually hungover. Kiki, he said softly. I didn't expect you to come. Sit down, Brent. Dr. Sarah says you have something to share. The chair creaked as he sat. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the accident, about everything after. Brent has been working on his accountability, Dr. Sarah explained. Would you like to share what you wrote, Brent? Papers rustled. Brent cleared his throat. I've been running away, he began, voice shaking. Not just from what I did to you, but from who I am. Every drink, every woman, every risky deal. It was all about escaping the guilt. Guilt? I kept my voice neutral. Or shame? Both. He paused. The night of the accident, I wasn't just drunk. I was angry. This was new. Rose's hand found mine, squeezing gently. Angry about what? Your success. Your gallery opening. Everyone talking about how talented you were, how bright your future was. His voice cracked. I was failing at the firm, taking money from Dad to cover my mistakes. And there you were, shining. So, you decided to dim my light? No, I didn't mean to. He broke off, and I heard him fighting for control. I wanted to drive you home, to prove I could still be your big brother, your protector. Instead, I destroyed everything. Not everything, I corrected. Just my sight, my art, my trust in family. Ms. Whitney, Dr. Sarah interjected, your brother has made significant progress in acknowledging his actions. Has he acknowledged telling Dad to bury the accident report, or Mom to pay off the witnesses? Silence fell heavy in the room. That wasn't his idea, a new voice said from the doorway. Dad, what are you doing here? I stood, angry at the intrusion. The center called, said it might help with Brent's recovery. His footsteps approached slowly. And they're right. It's time for the whole truth. Dad, don't, Brent started. No, son, enough. Dad's voice sounded ancient. It was my idea to cover it up, all of it. Your mother wanted to go to the police, but I couldn't bear to see my son in jail. So you let your daughter live in darkness instead? I convinced myself it was protecting both of you, that money and influence could fix anything. He laughed bitterly. Look how well that turned out. Rose's hand tightened on mine as Dad continued. Every time Brent got in trouble after that, I cleaned it up. Every mistake, every scandal. I threw money at the problem until it went away. But I couldn't fix what we did to you. We? My voice was ice. Me. What I did to you. By choosing him. By pretending it wasn't destroying our family. By watching you struggle alone while we protected him. I heard him step closer, smelled his familiar aftershave. The company takeover, he said quietly. You planned it all along, didn't you? Waited until we dug ourselves so deep we couldn't fight back? I learned from the best, Dad. You taught me all about power and control. Just not the lessons you intended. Kira? Brent's voice was barely a whisper. What happens now? I turned toward his voice. Now you get clean. You face your demons without Daddy's checkbook to chase them away. You learn what it means to live with consequences. And me? Dad asked. You'll do exactly what we discussed. Step down, watch everything you built transform into something new, something honest. And if we refuse, then I release everything, every document, every payoff, every crime you committed to protect your precious son. Dr. Sarah cleared her throat. Perhaps we should... No, I cut her off. They need to hear this. For 6 years, I've lived in darkness while they lived in denial. That ends now. I stood, unfolding my cane. Rose, we're leaving. Dad, the board expects your resignation letter tomorrow. Brent, stay here. Get better. Or don't. But understand this. Your actions have consequences now. As we walked out, Dad called after me. Kira, please, we're still family. I paused at the door. Family sees each other, Dad. All I see is darkness. Maybe now you'll understand how that feels. The door closed behind us, and Rose guided me toward the elevator. You okay? She asked. No, I answered honestly. But for the first time since the accident, I think I might be getting there. Your mother's here, Emma announced, her voice tense. She's refusing to leave until she speaks with you. I set down my coffee. 3 months had passed since the rehab center confrontation. Dad had resigned as promised, Brent was still in treatment. And Mom? Well, this was new. Send her in. The click of her heels was unsteady, not her usual confident stride. She smelled of white wine at 10 in the morning. Have you seen the news? She threw something onto my desk, presumably a newspaper. Your father's resignation is everywhere. Our friends are whispering, the country club. Seriously? I cut her off. That's what you're worried about? The country club? You've destroyed everything we built. No, Mom, I exposed everything you buried. I leaned back in my chair. How's the wine treating you this morning? She gasped. How dare you? I can smell it from here. Pinot Grigio, right? Your favorite breakfast companion? I didn't come here to be insulted. Why did you come here, Mom? To defend Dad's honor? To plead Brent's case? Or just to remind me what a terrible daughter I am? Her chair scraped back. I came to tell you that Brent's getting out of rehab next week. He's different now. He wants to make amends. Amends? I stood, walking around my desk. Let me show you something. I moved to the wall where I knew my old paintings hung, the last ones I'd created before the accident. These are worth quite a bit now, I said, running my fingers along the frames I couldn't see. Tragic story adds value, apparently. The blind artist's final works. Kira, please. Did you know I still dream in color? That I wake up every morning hoping, just for a second, that I'll open my eyes and see light? My voice remained steady. But instead, I get darkness. And you know what else I get? The memory of my mother choosing to protect the person who put me here. We were trying to protect both of you. By teaching him actions don't have consequences? By showing me that family loyalty only flows one way? The door opened, Jordan's familiar footsteps. The board is ready, he announced. Board? Mom's voice sharpened. What board meeting? The one where we announce Brent's new position. I smiled. Assuming he passes the drug tests, of course. What position? Head of our new charitable foundation, focusing on drunk driving prevention and victim support. I moved back to my desk. Ironic, isn't it? You can't be serious. Oh, I am. He'll work directly under me, speaking at schools, sharing his story. Every day facing what he did, helping others avoid his mistakes. That's cruel. Cruel? I laughed. Cruel is leaving your daughter alone in darkness while you coddle her attacker. This is justice. Jordan cleared his throat. The board's waiting, Kira. Mom, you have two choices. Join us at the board meeting, support Brent's new role, and be part of the solution. Or leave, keep drinking, and watch from the sidelines as your perfect family facade crumbles completely. Her breathing hitched. You really hate us, don't you? No, Mom. I just stopped loving you more than I love myself. The boardroom fell silent as we entered. I took my place at the head of the table, feeling the weight of every gaze. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, today we announce the launch of the Whitney Foundation for Accident Prevention and Victim Support. Leading this initiative will be someone with first-hand experience of the devastation drunk driving causes, my brother Brent. The door opened again. Familiar, shuffling steps. Kiki? Brent's voice was clear, sober. I'm ready. Are you? Because once you start this, there's no going back. Every speech, every interview, every public appearance, you'll have to own what you did. I know. He paused. It's time I stepped into the light. Mom made a small, broken sound. Very well. I nodded to Jordan. Distribute the press releases. Brent, take your seat. Mom, are you staying? A long moment passed. Then, the sound of her chair pulling back. I'll stay, she whispered, for both my children. As Jordan began the presentation, I felt something shift in the room, and in myself. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was reconstruction, building something new from the wreckage of our past. But as I sat there, listening to the plans unfold, I wondered, in my quest for justice, had I become what I hated? Or had I finally found a way to turn darkness into light? The answer, I realized, would depend on what happened next. The auditorium buzzed with nervous energy as I sat in the front row, waiting for Brent's first public speech. 6 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Ready? Rose whispered beside me. Before I could answer, Mom slipped into the seat on my other side. She smelled of coffee now, not wine. Small victories. The media's here, she said quietly. Your father's in the back. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. The foundation's launch had attracted more attention than expected. A prominent family's private scandal transformed into public redemption. Brent took the stage. I heard his footsteps, steadier than I'd ever known them to be. My name is Brent, he began, voice clear and strong, and I destroyed my sister's life. The room fell silent. 6 years ago, I got behind the wheel drunk. My sister, a talented artist, had just opened her first gallery show. I was jealous, angry, and stupid. One decision changed everything. I felt Mom tense beside me. For years, I hid behind money and privilege. My parents protected me, but my sister, his voice cracked. My sister lived in darkness, while I walked in light I didn't deserve. Rose squeezed my hand. Today that changes. This foundation isn't about redemption. I don't deserve that. It's about responsibility, about consequences, about turning damage into purpose. Suddenly, Dad's voice rang out from the back. This is wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as he strode down the aisle. Dad, don't, Brent warned from the stage. No, let him speak, I said, standing. Come on, Dad. Tell everyone what's wrong about this. His footsteps stopped near me. This public confession, this spectacle, is exactly what should have happened 6 years ago, I finished. The truth, finally seeing daylight. I was trying to protect your reputation, I cut in, your legacy, your son, never me. The audience was silent, witnessing our family's raw wounds exposed. But you know what, Dad? I continued, turning to face the crowd. Your protection destroyed him more than jail ever could. Every time you buried his mistakes, you buried another piece of his humanity. Kaiki, Brent called from the stage. Can I tell them the rest? I nodded. When my sister took control of the company, I thought it was revenge, he said. But she did what our parents never could. She forced me to face myself, to see the truth in the darkness I gave her. Mom stood then, her voice shaking but clear. I enabled this. Every time I made excuses, every time I chose my son over justice for my daughter, I failed them both. The room was absolutely still. The Whitney Foundation, I announced, isn't about my blindness. It's about seeing clearly, about choices and consequences, about turning pain into purpose. Kira, Dad's voice was different now, broken, real. I was wrong, about everything. I know, I said simply. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He took a deep breath. I'd like to make a donation, not money. We both know you don't need that. But my time, my connections, my influence used for something right, for once. Brent spoke from the stage. Dad, are you saying? I'm saying I want to help, both of you, the right way this time. I felt tears threatening, the first real ones in years. You understand this means publicly acknowledging everything? No more hiding? Yes, he said firmly. It's time I learned from my daughter what real strength looks like. The audience erupted in applause, not the polite kind, but the raw, emotional kind that comes from witnessing something real. Later, as we gathered in my office, Rose brought out champagne. To the Whitney Foundation, she toasted. To consequences, Brent added. To truth, said Mom. To vision, Dad offered quietly. I raised my glass. To seeing clearly in the dark. As their glasses clinked around me, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. My revenge had transformed into something bigger than justice. It had become a bridge back to the light. You know, Brent said softly, you could have destroyed us all. Instead, you forced us to be better. Don't mistake this for mercy, I replied. This is justice, the kind that heals instead of hurts. And us? Mom asked. Our family? I thought about the long road ahead, the foundation work, the public scrutiny, the daily choice to turn darkness into purpose. We're not fixed, I said honestly, but maybe we're finally seeing each other clearly, and that's a start. The setting sun warmed my face through the office windows. I couldn't see its light, but I could feel its truth. Sometimes the deepest darkness shows us the way back to light, not through forgiveness, but through transformation, not through forgetting, but through purpose. And sometimes, just sometimes, revenge can build something better than what it breaks.
Cherry Creek North, an upscale neighborhood in Denver, lay wrapped in morning mist. On a quiet street lined with luxurious mansions stood a house that showcased modern architectural beauty. Mary Brown stood by the large window of her home office, gazing at the distant Rocky Mountains. The soft pink morning sun gently colored the snow-capped peaks. She took a sip of her organic blend coffee and sat down at her latest iMac. 2 days until the deadline. She murmured to herself as she immersed herself in designing a new catalog for a high-end sportswear brand. At 36, Mary possessed an intellectual beauty that belied her age and was Denver's most sought-after freelance graphic designer. Her natural makeup and simple yet high-quality cashmere dress enhanced her sophisticated air. The office interior reflected her designer's eye, with Scandinavian furniture harmoniously blending with modern art. "Honey, I think I'll be home early today." A message arrived from her husband Richard around noon. He was a sharp professional, Denver's premier commercial real estate broker handling deals worth millions. Tall and handsome, always impeccably dressed in luxury suits, he was the epitome of success. Mary had met him 3 years ago while working on a condominium brochure design. After a whirlwind romance that seemed straight out of a movie, they held a lavish wedding with 500 guests that became the talk of Denver. "Mary, dear." At 3 p.m., she received a call from her mother-in-law, Elizabeth. A woman of refined beauty, Elizabeth had once owned a chain of luxury boutiques and still reigned as a social elite. Since losing her husband 5 years ago, she had been living an elegant retired life in her grand mansion in the Denver suburbs. "You're coming to the country club event this weekend, aren't you?" Her mother-in-law always exuded an intimidating presence with her perfect fashion sense and bearing. Though outwardly polite, Mary sometimes found it hard to read Elizabeth's true feelings beneath the surface. At dusk, Richard returned home early as planned. His luxury BMW X7 glided onto the white gravel driveway. "I'm home, Mary." Her husband strode through the door looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Mary felt renewed gratitude for the unexpectedly happy life she'd found in 3 years of marriage. This enviable lifestyle, ideal marriage, and secure position in high society. However, Mary had no way of knowing that this perfect daily life was about to crumble in a terrifying way. At 6 a.m., Mary woke up as usual. Richard was breathing quietly beside her in bed. She got up carefully to avoid making noise and changed into her latest Lululemon yoga wear. In the kitchen, she made a green smoothie using organic vegetables and fruits from Whole Foods. Using nutrient-rich ingredients was Mary's morning ritual. After 30 minutes of stretching in the glass-walled home gym, the rosy morning sun had begun to illuminate the Rocky Mountain ridgeline. "Good morning." Richard appeared in a perfectly pressed Armani suit after his shower. While brewing coffee for her husband, Mary confirmed today's schedule. "I have an online meeting with the LA client at 10. I have 3 property viewings. Should be back by evening." Their breakfast time together was brief, but it was their comfortable daily routine. After Richard left for work, Mary began her work in the home office. Bathed in natural light from the large windows, she immersed herself in advertising design work on her latest Mac. Her work was highly regarded, and she received constant requests from Denver's top companies. For lunch, she met her friend Jennifer at Cherry Creek Shopping Center. Jennifer worked in real estate and was a longtime friend introduced by Richard. "Mary, are the preparations for Elizabeth's birthday party going well?" "Yes, though I haven't heard many details yet." The two enjoyed a light lunch at a newly opened bistro while gossiping about the latest high society news. In the afternoon, she returned to work and handled video conferences with clients. In the evening, she received a call from Richard. "I'll be coming home with Mother today. We have something important to discuss." Mary was a bit surprised but quickly prepared for dinner. When Elizabeth visited, she had to prepare dishes to her taste. It was like an unwritten rule. At 7 p.m., Richard and Elizabeth arrived. Elizabeth was dressed, as always, in an elegant Chanel suit. "Mary, what a lovely fragrance." The dining room was filled with the fresh scent of lavender. Mary knew her mother-in-law's preferences. "Actually, I have a wonderful plan," Elizabeth began while sipping wine. "To celebrate my 70th birthday, let's go on a hiking trip, just the three of us." Richard has agreed. "Hiking?" Mary couldn't hide her surprise at the unexpected suggestion. Elizabeth wasn't known to be outdoorsy. "Yes. We'll go to Deer Creek Canyon Park. The scenery is perfect this time of year." Elizabeth's expression was unusually soft. "The mountains are beautiful in early summer, aren't they?" Richard was enthusiastic too. "It'll be good for you to take a break from work and refresh." Mary agreed, pressed by their enthusiasm. Indeed, a trip with the three of them might be a good opportunity to deepen their relationship. That night, before bed, Mary was checking online for new hiking gear. Richard was already breathing steadily in bed. Outside the window, Denver's night lights twinkled quietly. As Mary savored the happiness of this peaceful daily life, she felt a vague anticipation for the upcoming family trip. At that moment, she couldn't have imagined that this trip would change her life forever. At 4:30 a.m., Mary woke up before the alarm clock rang. The sky visible from the bedroom window was still dark, with stars shining crisp and clear. In bed, she thought about the strange dream she'd had last night. Standing on a cliff. But she couldn't remember what happened next. "Ready?" Richard appeared in his newly purchased North Face hiking wear after his shower. Mary nodded silently and changed into the same brand's outfit. In the kitchen, she packed the light meals and drinks she'd prepared the day before into a waterproof bag. Organic energy bars, trail mix, and hot tea in an insulated flask. Everything had been chosen with Elizabeth's preferences in mind. "The weather forecast looks fine." While checking the weather information displayed on the Apple TV in the living room, Mary also picked up her camera bag. The latest mirrorless camera was a Christmas present from Richard last year. At 5 o'clock sharp, Elizabeth arrived right on schedule. "Good morning, Mary." Elizabeth was surprisingly casual in her appearance. Instead of her usual elegant designer brands, she wore functional outdoor wear. However, her bearing remained as graceful as ever. "Everything's ready. It's going to be a wonderful day." There was something different in Elizabeth's voice. Mary felt a moment of unease but didn't dwell on it. The car left the quiet early morning streets of Denver and headed west on I-70. The street lights gradually became fewer, and they eventually entered a dark mountain road. The car was quiet, with Richard and Elizabeth occasionally speaking in low voices. "We're here." When they arrived at the Deer Creek Canyon Park parking lot, the sky had just begun to brighten. Only 3 cars were in the parking lot, and the surroundings were silent. In the distance, an American crow could be heard calling. "The temperature is lower than expected." As Elizabeth said, the air at around 2,000 meters elevation was cold, their breath visible in white puffs. Mary put on the fleece jacket she had prepared. "The route is this way." Richard led the way while checking his map app. The well-maintained mountain path climbed at a gentle gradient. Tall ponderosa pines lined both sides, filling the air with a fresh pine scent. Taking several breaks along the way, the 3 walked on quietly. Occasionally, Elizabeth would stop to take landscape photos. However, there was less of their usual social conversation, and a strange tension seemed to hang in the air. "This is the scenic point." After about 2 hours of walking, they reached their destination. Below stretched the Denver cityscape, wrapped in morning mist. The view from the steep cliff was truly breathtaking. "Let's take a break." At Elizabeth's suggestion, they sat down a little way from the cliff. Mary poured tea from the flask and offered it to Elizabeth. At that moment, Richard moved several meters away to check his mobile phone. The wind grew stronger. Mary's long hair covered her face as she unconsciously moved closer to the cliff edge to look at the view. That's when she faintly heard a conversation behind her. "The insurance procedures are all taken care of, right?" Elizabeth's voice. Gone was its usual elegance, replaced by a cold tone. "Yes, I increased it 3 months ago. If we make it look like an accident, it'll be perfect." Richard's response sent a chill down Mary's spine. She seems to have noticed something recently. "It has to be today." In that instant, Mary understood everything. Her husband's unnaturally kind behavior lately, her mother-in-law's sudden trip suggestion, and the meaning of last night's dream. By the time she tried to turn around, it was already too late. A strong force pushed her from behind, and Mary's body went over the cliff edge. In her final moment before falling, she saw their cold expressions. Richard's emotionless gaze. Elizabeth's satisfied smile. Time seemed to stop. The sound of cutting through the wind. The rustling of trees. Her own scream. Then, a violent impact. Though the trees somewhat cushioned her fall, Mary's consciousness gradually faded. As sirens began to sound in the distance, only one thought swirled in her mind. "I will survive, no matter what." When consciousness returned, the first thing she noticed was the smell of disinfectant. A private room at UC Health University of Colorado Hospital. Soft sunlight streamed through the large windows, gently illuminating the predominantly white interior. Abstract paintings hung on the walls, giving the room an almost luxury hotel-like atmosphere. Mary gritted her teeth against the pain that enveloped her entire body. The memory of what happened before she lost consciousness stabbed at her mind like a sharp blade. Her husband and mother-in-law's conspiracy. The fall from the cliff. And those cold expressions. As the door to the hospital room slowly opened, Mary immediately closed her eyes. "Still not awake." Elizabeth's voice. Her usual dignified tone had returned. "The doctor said she should regain consciousness soon." Next, Richard's footsteps approached. His leather shoes made faint sounds on the expensive flooring. "Are you sure this is okay?" Richard's voice carried feigned concern. Mary continued to breathe regularly, as if in deep sleep. The breathing technique she had learned from her mother, who had worked as a nurse, was now proving useful in an unexpected situation. "Oh," she moved. Elizabeth raised her voice as if noticing something. Mary decided to slowly open her eyes. The first thing she saw was the two of them standing by her bedside. Elizabeth was dressed in a top-tier designer suit, and Richard was immaculate in a navy Armani suit. Like stage actors playing the roles of family members distraught over an accident. "Mary! Thank goodness!" Richard showed an expression of relief as he tried to take Mary's hand. Though she felt an instinctive urge to avoid it, she remained passive with a vacant expression. "Do you remember anything before the accident?" In response to Elizabeth's question, Mary shook her head. The gesture was calculated to convey confusion and anxiety. "Why am I here?" She made her voice tremble as she pretended to have lost her memory. "You slipped while hiking," Richard began to explain. "You fell from the cliff. We were so worried." Mary felt nauseous at the false kindness in his words. But she didn't let it show on her face. "Miraculously, there don't seem to be any serious injuries," Elizabeth explained as if playing the role of a doctor. "But you'll need to rest for a while." At that moment, the real doctor entered the room. The middle-aged doctor with graying hair approached Mary with a gentle expression. "Mrs. Brown, how are you feeling?" My head is. It's normal for memories to be unclear. Temporary memory confusion often occurs due to the impact of bruising." The doctor continued explaining Mary's condition, mixing in medical terminology. Full body bruising, mild concussion, and the need for a week of observation. "Thanks to your family's dedicated care, we can expect a smooth recovery." At those words, Mary inwardly smiled bitterly. The very people who had injured her were now playing the role of caregivers. She felt a quiet anger at this ironic situation. Rehabilitation can be done at home. However, someone needs to be with you at all times. Elizabeth immediately responded to the doctor's words. "Of course, we'll take turns staying with her." Mary felt a new fear at the sight of Elizabeth playing the perfect mother-in-law. Home recovery might give them another opportunity. But Mary's face showed nothing. She just stared blankly at the ceiling. At that moment, one decision had solidified within her. To perfect this act and continue playing the role of memory loss until she could gather definitive evidence. That was her only path to survival. Outside the window, Colorado's blue sky stretched out. That blue reminded her of happier days past. But now, Mary's heart was filled with a cold flame of revenge. 1 week after discharge, Mary sat on her living room sofa with her MacBook open. On the surface, she was playing the role of a patient slowly recovering from memory loss. However, the screen displayed records of real estate transactions and bank transfer histories. Richard was at work, and Elizabeth was out for social engagements. The two had been taking turns checking on her, but today was unusually quiet with no one around. "So this is it," Mary furrowed her brow at the transaction records displayed on the screen. A large-scale real estate development project that Richard had handled 3 years ago. Behind this seemingly successful project, massive debt had been hidden. In the silence broken only by the sound of typing, she gathered evidence one piece at a time. The life insurance policy that had been substantially increased 3 months before the accident. Traces of loan shark collections. And suspicious transfer records to Elizabeth's bank account. $3 million. When the total amount of Richard's debt became clear, Mary maintained an icy calm. An amount far exceeding her annual income as a designer. It explained why he had thought to kill her. She had already obtained security camera footage. Images of the two having a long discussion at Elizabeth's home early on the morning of the accident. And social media posts from hikers who had captured the incident on the mountain. The unnatural positioning of the 3 people visible in the distance completely contradicted the explanation of an accidental fall. "Ma'am, it's time for your medicine." Maria, the housekeeper, entered the living room at the scheduled time. Mary quickly closed her laptop and returned to playing the role of the obedient patient. "Thank you, Maria." The trembling of her hand as she accepted the medicine was also part of the act. After Maria left, Mary discreetly disposed of the pills in the glass. Her investigation of the medicine had revealed that it contained drugs that affected memory. In the evening, Richard returned home. "How are you feeling?" "Getting better, little by little." While smiling at her husband, Mary was thinking. Tomorrow, everything would be ready to submit all the evidence to the police. An anonymous tip had also been arranged. That night, after Richard had fallen asleep in the bedroom, Mary quietly made her way to the study. She had already confirmed the safe's combination while pretending to be unconscious in the hospital, catching it from Richard's phone screen. The stack of documents that came out contained decisive evidence of Elizabeth and Richard's conspiracy. Insurance fraud plans, fabricated accident explanations, and numerous documents with her forged signature. The next morning, when Elizabeth came to check on her as scheduled, everything came to an end. The doorbell rang, and the police arrived. Elizabeth was shocked, and Richard rushed home from work. The elegant masks fell from both their faces. "I never lost my memory for a moment." Mary's cold voice echoed through the silent living room. "I clearly remember your conversation just before you pushed me off the cliff." "This is ridiculous," Richard shouted. "There can't be any evidence. Everything was recorded." Mary produced the small recorder she had hidden in her clothes on the day of the hike. "No way." The color drained from Elizabeth's face. "This recorder is waterproof. It recorded your conversation along with my fall." The police calmly began reading them their rights. Police sirens broke the morning quiet of the upscale neighborhood. Outside the window, the beautiful Rocky Mountains gleamed as always. Mary felt a deep sigh escape as she sensed the beginning of a new life. It was over. All the false masks had fallen away on this morning. Denver was about to greet a new day. 1 year later in Denver. In her new design studio in Cherry Creek, Mary opened the newspaper while basking in the morning sun streaming through the large windows. Real estate tycoon Richard Brown sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder. Accomplice Elizabeth's 20-year sentence confirmed. She quietly closed the newspaper. The trial had dragged on longer than expected, but all the evidence had been accepted, and the two had received appropriate sentences. Stacks of new project proposals covered her desk. After the incident, Mary's reputation had grown even stronger. Her strength as a survivor had become its own brand in the creative world. "Your client has arrived," came the message from reception. Today she had a meeting with a new client. Outside the window, the Rocky Mountains stood unchanged. The place that had once brought her to the brink of death, Mary now saw with different eyes. That cliff had become the place that heralded the beginning of her new life. On her desk sat a photo of Mary smiling with her parents from her hometown. After the incident, she had started spending weekends at her family home in Minnesota. She was rediscovering the warmth of her true family. "Well, shall we begin?" Mary straightened her back and prepared to welcome her new client. There was no more hesitation in her eyes. She was certain that her life ahead was full of new possibilities. The city of Denver continued moving forward. And she too was taking a new step. In the bright sunshine, Mary's new story was quietly beginning. The Arizona summer shows no mercy. In late July, Phoenix temperatures soared above 105 degrees Fahrenheit day after day. My name is Melissa Hamilton, a 35-year-old Italian-American. At 5 a.m., before the sun peaks over the horizon, I'm already out jogging my usual route. I pass through the quiet residential streets of the Arcadia district, heading east on Indian School Road. Just as sweat begins trickling down my neck, the morning sun starts to rise from the horizon. This is how my day begins. When I return home, my 8-year-old daughter Caitlin is still sound asleep. Her brown hair looks just like mine. I'll style it into cute pigtails again today. Peeping into her room, I notice her science textbook left open by her pillow. She must have been studying diligently again last night. I secretly take pride in her maintaining top grades in her class. I shower, fix my hair, and put on my glasses. The reflection in the mirror is exactly what you'd expect of a product development manager at a Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical subsidiary. I select my suit, finish my makeup, and start preparing breakfast. "Mom, good morning." Caitlin's voice echoes through our quiet house as she runs down the stairs. Her smile is my whole world. "Good morning, Katie. We're having pancakes today. I added plenty of blueberries." "Yay! I love your pancakes, Mom." Over breakfast, Caitlin excitedly tells me about yesterday's science class, how her experiment was successful and her teacher praised her, how she's keeping an observation diary with her friends. The sparkle in her eyes is so bright, you'd never guess she experienced her parents' divorce 3 years ago. My divorce from David was amicable. He works as a pediatrician at Phoenix General Hospital. With his gentle nature, he continues to be a responsible father to our daughter, never missing his bi-weekly weekend visits. "Dad's taking me to the zoo this Sunday." I smiled gently at Caitlin's words. David remarried 2 years ago. His wife, Rachel Smith, is 42 and the head nurse at the same hospital. She's known for being reliable at work, with her distinctive neat black bob haircut. After dropping off my daughter at school, I head to my office near Scottsdale Medical Center. Having recently been promoted, I'm busy leading a new drug development project. Still, the work is fulfilling. My colleagues trust me, and the project is progressing smoothly. In the evening, I pick up Caitlin from after-school care. On our way home, we make it a point to share the day's events with each other. We always have dinner together. Sometimes it might be something simple, but I try to cook homemade meals whenever possible. After dinner, I spend precious time with my daughter while helping with her homework. On weekends, we enjoy shopping at Whole Foods Market or having brunch at True Food Kitchen. This has become our cherished routine. Sometimes, we treat ourselves to some luxury shopping at Kierland Commons. Every moment spent with my daughter is an irreplaceable treasure. I maintain a good relationship with David's parents. They take care of Caitlin one weekend each month, and I'm often invited to join them for dinner. Even after the divorce, our family bonds remain unchanged. 3 years have passed, and we had established a new rhythm in our lives. Balancing weekday work and childcare, weekend family time, and bi-weekly visits with her father. Everything was stable, our days peaceful. The annual summer vacation. My daughter and I were excited about our long-awaited trip to the Grand Canyon. At that time, we had no way of knowing that this journey would dramatically change our lives. We had meticulously planned our Grand Canyon trip well before Caitlin's summer break began. We were scheduled to spend 3 days immersed in nature, just mother and daughter. To nurture her interest in science, I had included educational tours about geological formation processes and ecosystems. Katie, is your new camera fully charged? The night before departure, I called out while checking our checklist in the living room. The small digital camera was her birthday present, chosen specifically for this trip. Both the battery and spare are full. I also prepared my observation notebook. Caitlin proudly showed me her brand new notebook. The cover carefully read, Grand Canyon Research Project by Caitlin Hamilton. Such meticulousness reminds me of myself. I loaded the cooler into the car the night before, packed with drinks and snacks. Arizona summers are brutal. Staying hydrated is crucial. I was especially careful with temperature control, including extra ice packs. Departure day. I woke up before the alarm clock, which showed 5 a.m. Caitlin, who had risen earlier than usual, was already waiting for breakfast in the living room, wearing a light blue dress and her new backpack. Mom, let's go. Breakfast first, honey. You need to eat properly. While calming my eager daughter, I prepared a simple breakfast. By 6 a.m., we were leaving home. Our SUV quietly drove through the early morning streets, before the sun had fully risen. Can I play some music? Of course, but not too loud. Caitlin's favorite playlist started playing in the car. She occasionally hummed along while watching the scenery outside. As we left the city and entered the highway, the sunrise illuminated the desert landscape vividly. I'm hungry. Yes, let's have breakfast soon. As planned, we got breakfast at a drive-thru. Caitlin chose a cheeseburger and orange juice. Coffee and a bagel were enough for me. While eating in the parking lot, we reviewed our plans. About 3 hours to the Grand Canyon. We'll take breaks along the way. Are there really dinosaur fossils? That's right. We can see them at the museum. About an hour after resuming our drive, the car's digital clock showed 10 a.m. The outside temperature had climbed above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and we had the air conditioning running strong. Caitlin was writing something in her observation notebook in the back seat. That's when it happened. "Mom, the air conditioning smells weird, my head hurts." Checking the rearview mirror, I could see her complexion had turned pale. "What kind of smell? Are you feeling okay?" There was a hint of tension in my voice. "A sweet smell. I feel nauseous." My instincts immediately sensed danger. Sweet odor, headache, nausea. This wasn't just motion sickness. I immediately pulled over to the shoulder and turned off the engine. I got Caitlin out of the car to breathe fresh air. While taking out my ID from my wallet, I was already dialing 911. "We'll send emergency services and police. Please provide your current location." The operator's voice rang out calmly. While relaying our GPS coordinates, I checked the air conditioning vent. There was an unfamiliar cloth stuffed inside. With my pharmaceutical background, I instinctively knew it had been used as a medium for something. On the scorching roadside, I held Caitlin close, waiting for the approaching sound of sirens. From this moment, our peaceful daily life would change dramatically. At that time, no one could have imagined the terrifying truth lurking behind this incident. The ambulance arrived first, followed by 2 police cars sliding onto the scene with sirens blaring. Under the scorching sun, I held Caitlin tight while watching the scene unfold. The heat rising from the asphalt made the tense atmosphere even heavier. "Mrs. Hamilton." The paramedics rushed over. They quickly checked Caitlin's condition and began detailed examinations in the ambulance. Her blood pressure, heart rate, and temperature were within normal range. However, the nausea and headache persisted. When I gently wiped the sweat from her forehead, Caitlin managed a weak smile. "Call Dad." "Yes, right away." As I reached for my phone, a paramedic approached. "There's a possibility of chemical poisoning. We need detailed tests at the hospital." I had the same thought. From my experience in the pharmaceutical industry, I could make some educated guesses based on the symptoms. Sweet odor, headache, nausea. These symptoms suggested the effects of specific drugs. However, it was too early to be certain. I carefully watched as police officers collected the cloth from the air conditioning as evidence. The evidence was carefully sealed in bags and labeled. One of the investigators approached me. He was a tall man, probably in his 50s. "Could you please tell us exactly what happened?" Moving to the shade of a police car to avoid the sun, I explained the sequence of events from departure to the incident as accurately as possible. The timeline, nature of the odor, progression of symptoms. I supplemented the situation from a professional perspective, drawing from my pharmaceutical company experience. The detective's hand moved quickly, taking notes. "Have there been any changes in your routine lately, or anything unusual?" "Nothing special, although we had been planning this trip for a month, and I think my daughter had been talking about it at school." The investigator's expression turned thoughtful. "It will take time to analyze the substance found in the air conditioning. We'll work on identifying it along with your daughter's blood test results. We'll conduct a thorough examination of the scene." Caitlin was transported to the hospital by ambulance. I wanted to ride along, but the police said they needed further questioning. I agreed to cooperate with the investigation after confirming my daughter's safety. As the on-scene investigation continued under the blazing sun, I realized the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Hamilton, did you notice any suspicious individuals around your car from last night to this morning? I traced back through my memories of the previous night. The car had been parked in our home garage. While we don't have security cameras, several neighbors do. I remembered that the house across the street had recently installed high-performance cameras. We'll need to check the street surveillance cameras. We're also starting to interview nearby residents. The detective nodded. Young investigators had already begun questioning neighbors. Sweat stains spread across the backs of their humid uniforms. The wait for hospital test results felt abnormally long. In the waiting room, I pondered the background of the incident. Was this a random accident, or a planned crime? In the air-conditioned waiting room, I clutched my phone with trembling hands. At 3 p.m., the test results finally came in. The substance detected in her blood was, as suspected, midazolam, a sleep-inducing drug. It's a medication used in hospitals. This discovery brought a new direction to the investigation. This medication is only available through medical institutions. It should be under strict control. The detective shot me a sharp look at my explanation. The scope of suspects had narrowed to medical professionals. The room's atmosphere tensed for a moment. The surveillance camera footage analysis was progressing. Around 2 a.m. last night, cameras had captured someone in black clothing lurking near our home. While the face wasn't visible, the body type suggested it was a woman. Something about the way they walked seemed familiar. Mrs. Hamilton, do you know anyone who works in medical facilities? With that question, one possibility surfaced in my mind. A constricting feeling in my chest. My ex-husband works as a pediatrician. I know several people at the hospital. I could hear my voice trembling slightly. The investigation steadily progressed. Identifying the drug's procurement route. Detailed analysis of surveillance camera footage. Interviewing related parties. Then, decisive evidence was found. The access records for the hospital's drug storage. These records, normally strictly managed, showed an unusual gap. Between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. Only a limited number of people had authorization to enter the storage during those hours. The police officer's expression changed momentarily upon checking the records. And gradually, the perpetrator's identity emerged. A methodical crime. Someone with medical knowledge. Someone who knew our movements. All evidence pointed in one direction. In my mind, one person's image became crystal clear. After overnight observation, Caitlin had fully recovered her energy. She was organizing photos in her observation notebook in the hospital room, as if nothing had happened. However, great anxiety swirled in my heart. If that person was behind this incident. Late that night, police made an urgent contact. New surveillance footage had been found. A parking lot security camera. It clearly showed Rachel. Though wearing a black hoodie, her distinctive walk and body type matched perfectly. The footage captured her leaving through the hospital's back entrance near the drug storage late at night. The arrest was made the next morning in the hospital staff parking lot. As she arrived for work, her black bob haircut perfectly groomed and wearing her head nurse's dignified expression, police officers handcuffed her. Surrounding colleagues watched the scene in disbelief. "Rachel Smith, you're under arrest for attempted murder." Rachel nodded quietly without resistance. At that moment, her usual composed demeanor vanished, replaced by deep exhaustion. The house search uncovered decisive evidence one after another. A notebook recording our movements hidden deep in her bedroom closet. A map with detailed routes to the Grand Canyon. Midazolam ampoules and syringes. Everything had been perfectly planned. Her computer history revealed traces of meticulous preparation over the past 3 months. Research on drug effects and administration methods. Procedures to make it look like an accident. Records of my and Caitlin's daily routines. It showed an obsessive level of fixation. During questioning, Rachel calmly admitted to the crime. However, her words revealed the distortion of emotions she had carried for years. "I've always been someone's replacement." That statement began her full confession. She had failed 7 IVF attempts since marriage. Her age of 42 was pressing on her. And every time she saw David and Caitlin's relationship, her feeling of being just a substitute grew stronger. "At first, I just wanted to be Caitlin's mother. But..." Her voice trembled. "When I heard the news about Melissa's promotion, something broke inside me. She has everything. Youth, career, memories with David, and Caitlin." The planning began then. Using her position as head nurse to secure free access to the drug storage. Taking out necessary drugs during night shifts. When she learned of our trip plans, she thought it was the perfect opportunity. I intended to make it look like an accident. The sleeping car falling off a cliff, but Melissa noticed too quickly. As expected of a pharmaceutical company expert. Her words carried both irony and a sense of resignation. "I just wanted to be real. Not someone's replacement, but a real wife, a real mother, but everything was fake. I myself was fake." Rachel's mental state gradually became clear. The growing loneliness with each failed fertility treatment. A heart torn between perfect evaluation at work and feeling like a substitute at home. The frustration of not being able to monopolize David's affection. All of Caitlin's mom words are directed at her. "I'm just Rachel." That was unbearable. Under the fluorescent lights of the interrogation room, deep shadows marked Rachel's face. The traces of setbacks accumulated over 42 years and twisted emotions were etched in her expression. "Melissa's success felt like it was negating my existence. The more she shined, the more I became a shadow. So I thought I'd make her disappear." The confession lasted 5 hours. During this time, Rachel detailed every aspect of her plan. The reason for choosing the drug, research on administration methods, all the preparations aimed at perfect execution. The precision reflected her professionalism as a nurse. "If I had succeeded that day, maybe I could have become a real mom." With those final words, Rachel heaved a deep sigh. The interrogation room clock showed 9 p.m. Outside the window, darkness had already fallen. David learned of this fact late that night. When he rushed to the police station after receiving a call from a hospital colleague, his expression mixed deep sadness and confusion. No one had understood the depth of darkness his wife had been harboring. I received this series of reports in Caitlin's hospital room. My daughter was sleeping peacefully. She still doesn't know that her life was endangered by her stepmother's distorted love. A month has passed since the incident. Phoenix's summer remains harsh. Leaving the psychologist's office, I reflected on the events of the past month. Rachel has been indicted and awaits trial. David continues going to the hospital daily with an exhausted expression. I could see the fierce conflict between his mission as a doctor and regret as a husband. How could I not have noticed? Last week's words from our cafe conversation still echo in my ears. He spoke about his days with Rachel while heaving deep sighs. How her smile gradually hardened with each failed fertility treatment. How he sensed something off about her desperate attempts to be the perfect wife but looked away. Melissa, I'm truly sorry for putting you and Caitlin in danger. His voice was filled with deep self-reproach. Although we had maintained a good relationship since our divorce, this incident cast a new shadow. Caitlin attends child psychology counseling twice a week. Fortunately, she doesn't seem to fully understand the essence of the incident. Still, the sudden environmental changes have had some impact on her. Hey, Mom. Dad looks sad, doesn't he? Caitlin said quietly during dinner one day. In her own way, she must sense her father's emotional pain. Dad's just a bit tired right now. But he loves you just as much as ever, sweetie. I try to stay cheerful in front of my daughter. However, when I'm alone at night, the terror of that day sometimes suddenly resurfaces. Every time I hear the air conditioning, I feel a chill run down my spine. David's parents are also deeply pained by this situation. His mother, in particular, seems to blame herself for accepting Rachel as family. If only I had noticed her loneliness. During Sunday brunch, she quietly wiped away tears. Afterward, she offered to take care of Caitlin twice a week. She's quietly supporting the mother-daughter recovery. In counseling, I faced various emotions. Fear, anger, and strangely enough, even a kind of sympathy for Rachel. The counselor explained that this was natural as part of the healing process. The compassion in your heart hasn't been lost. That's a wonderful thing. A new rhythm of life gradually took shape. David temporarily requested a transfer from pediatrics. He said he needed time to rebuild himself. The hospital administration accepted his decision with understanding. Caitlin gradually regained her spirit. She resumed her science club activities and started a new observation diary. Though she occasionally shows anxious expressions, following the counselor's advice, we decided to protect her pace without rushing. Mom, let's go to the Grand Canyon again. When Caitlin said this the other day, tears welled up in my eyes. Those words carried a small courage to keep moving forward. David also began showing signs of recovery. Every Wednesday evening, he started joining us for dinner. The time we spend together as three people, listening to Caitlin's school stories, feels like it's nurturing a new form of family bond. Now, 3 months after the incident, our lives are showing definite changes. I've resumed my morning jogs, and on holidays, we go to the farmer's market as a family. Though the scars remain, the strength to move forward while carrying them is gradually growing. Everyone gets lost somewhere in life. I remember the counselor's words. What's important is having someone to reach out when you're lost, and having the courage to take that hand. Our new steps were beginning right there. Outside the window, Arizona's scorching summer was coming to an end, with gentle autumn hints beginning to drift in. Like the changing seasons, our lives too were moving forward into a new chapter. My name is Caitlin Walker. It's been almost 10 years since I started working as a librarian at the Greenwich Library. The time I spend walking between the shelves arranging books is my moment of bliss. I especially love the children's story time. Seeing young eyes light up with stories makes me feel I made the right career choice. It was at this library where I had a fateful encounter. 10 years ago, a man rushed in just before closing time. His name was Matthew, and he was looking for architecture reference books. At the time, he was a promising young employee making his mark at a major local construction company. Now he's continued his path of success as the company's vice president. We got married, and now we live in an upscale neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. This town is a wonderful place where old traditions harmonize with new culture. It's an ideal community with high educational standards and many art lovers. We live in a house with a spacious garden, the three of us with our 8-year-old daughter Amy. Amy has grown into a smart child who loves books, just like me. Though only in 2nd grade, she already reads books well beyond her age level and borrows several new ones every time she visits the library. Her kind and thoughtful nature makes her popular among her classmates. She's especially fond of her father Matthew, and they have a habit of always taking walks in the park on holidays. Matthew has a sister named Samantha. She's married to Stephen, a renowned doctor in this area. As a full-time housewife living an elegant life, she actively participates in PTA and charity activities, highly regarded in the community as an ideal wife and mother. Samantha's husband Stephen keeps busy as a mid-career physician at Greenwich Hospital. Though work consumes most of his time, leaving little for family, he's a sincere person who deeply trusts his wife and daughter and puts family first, earning strong respect from those around him. Then there's Lily, Samantha and Stephen's daughter. At 10 years old, she possesses remarkable piano talent. Well-mannered with a mature demeanor, she consistently places among the top in local piano competitions. Notably, she has the blue eyes and straight nose characteristic of the Walker family lineage, features shared by my husband Matthew and his father, showing the strength of their bloodline. Lily and Amy are truly close as cousins. Despite their 2-year age difference, they play together almost every holiday. I often see Amy watching with sparkling eyes as Lily practices piano. Sometimes they even attempt piano duets together, which is heartwarming to watch. Our two families maintain a very close relationship. Sunday family dinners have become an indispensable tradition, alternating between our homes. We enjoy my traditional roast chicken along with wine that Samantha brings. Such peaceful times have continued for these past few years. We frequently see each other at children's school events and lessons too. The Samantha family comes to support Amy's school performances, and we always attend Lily's piano recitals. Being able to share in each other's children's growth as if they were our own, that was our pride. In the Greenwich community, we're known as an ideal family. We always participate as a family in holiday barbecues and church gatherings. We often hear neighbors say, "What a wonderful family you are." On weekends, our spacious living room fills with family laughter. Matthew cheerfully shares stories about work, while Amy reports on her day at school. Sometimes Stephen joins us, coming home early for a change, as the aroma of Samantha's homemade apple pie wafts through the air. Lily's piano music became the soundtrack to our lives. Yes, everything should have been perfect. At least, that's what I thought. I noticed a change in early October, as autumn was beginning to make its presence felt. It was around the time when Greenwich's street trees started changing color, and library visitors began wearing light coats. At first, it was just a subtle sense that something was off. Matthew, who usually came home by 7 o'clock, started coming home later and later, making excuses like, "The current project is entering a crucial phase." Sometimes it would be past 10 o'clock. The time we spent sharing warm family dinners gradually decreased. "Sorry, I'll be late again tonight." Short messages like this became more frequent. Even when I waited for a reply, sometimes he wouldn't even read them. The casual living room conversations we used to have after he came home had somehow diminished. There were other changes too. Matthew suddenly changed his smartphone password. Though he explained it as company security policy, something felt off about his explanation. Since then, he started keeping his phone close at all times, even placing it within reach on the bathroom counter while showering. What particularly concerned me was the sudden increase in phone calls with his sister Samantha. What used to be once or twice weekly contact became almost daily. When taking calls, he would shut himself in his study and speak in hushed tones. When I asked if they were discussing family matters, he would give vague answers like, "Just some coordination." Amy sensitively picked up on these changes in her father. Weekend park walks were increasingly met with excuses like, "I need to review work documents today," and a lonely shadow began appearing in our daughter's eyes. "Dad, are you busy with work lately?" One night, when Amy asked Matthew this, he showed clear signs of distress. "That's right," he answered with a trembling voice, which I didn't miss. As late October approached, Matthew's suspicious behavior became even more noticeable. I increasingly noticed the study light leaking out late at night. When I peeked in, I would find him desperately researching something on his computer. The way he hurriedly closed the screen gave me an eerie feeling of wrongness. His frequent checking of family albums also concerned me. He started repeatedly looking at Amy's childhood photos in particular. Photos from right after her birth, when she first walked, her kindergarten entrance ceremony. He would stare at each photo as if trying to verify something. One day, while organizing the study drawer, I accidentally came across a bundle of hospital-related documents. Papers with the letterhead of Greenwich Hospital, where Samantha's husband Stephen worked, were neatly stacked. Mixed in were specialized materials about genetic testing and blood types, making my heart pound heavily. Conversations between us as a couple had clearly decreased too. Even during meals, Matthew was absorbed in checking his smartphone, barely listening to Amy's or my conversations. Even when I asked, "Are you listening?" he would just give vague responses like, "Ah, yes." He seemed to deliberately avoid times when we could be alone together. The warm atmosphere had disappeared from our Sunday family dinners too. I caught Matthew and Samantha exchanging meaningful glances several times. Stephen was still caught up in work as usual and didn't seem to notice the tension, but Lily appeared to sense something. Even Lily's usually light piano tones felt heavy these days. Though Amy seemed to find support in time spent with her cousin, she started asking more frequently for, "Dad, give me a goodnight kiss before bed." Each time, Matthew would show an expression filled with guilt. What did these changes mean for our lives? Doubts began swirling in my mind. Cracks were definitely starting to appear in what I had thought was a perfect daily life. I started getting lost in thought even during work at the library. Story time with children, which used to be my greatest joy, now sometimes left me stumbling over words. Colleagues increasingly worried, asking, "Caitlin, are you okay?" At home, the family photos on the living room walls seemed to stare at me. Our wedding day photo, the photo right after Amy's birth, last year's Christmas party group photo. Everyone looks so happy, smiling. But now, I can't shake the feeling that something is hidden beneath those smiles. What particularly concerned me was how Matthew suddenly started paying attention to his health. He began going to the gym he'd never shown interest in before and even started dieting. Though he said, "I need to start taking care of myself at my age," there seemed to be some sense of urgency in his manner. I also overheard him consulting with his sister Samantha about health management over the phone. The other day, Amy suddenly asked when she came home from school, "Dad, have you always had blue eyes?" Come to think of it, Matthew had recently started studying Amy's eye color more intently. I answered, "Yes, he inherited the same blue eyes as your grandmother," but my daughter's innocent question oddly stuck with me. I can't forget the words Matthew started muttering sometimes in the living room after Amy had gone to bed, "Blood will tell." At first I thought it was just work stress venting, but the way he looked at family photos each time only increased my anxiety. As November began, Greenwich quickly transformed into its winter appearance. Mornings echoed with the sound of sweeping leaves, frost began appearing in the garden visible from the window, and the street trees had completely shed their leaves. But the anxiety in my heart only continued to grow, like spring snow melting. Matthew's behavior became even stranger. Now he suddenly started showing an abnormal interest in Amy. During breakfast, he would stare at her face, observing her hair color and eye shape as if checking something. "Amy, you've grown so much lately," he would say in an almost probing tone. He also suddenly increased how often he took photos of Amy. Each time he pointed his smartphone at her, our daughter would show a slightly puzzled expression. Even when she asked, "Dad, another photo?" he would answer with an almost desperate manner, "I want to keep it as a memento." Interaction with the Samantha family became even more frequent. In addition to weekend family dinners, Matthew started dropping by on weekday evenings too. Leaving with words like, "I have important things to discuss with my sister," it wasn't uncommon to see them talking alone for long periods. Mid-November brought Lily's piano recital. Greenwich Community Center's hall was filled with local dignitaries. The deep resonance of Lily's Moonlight Sonata captivated the entire venue. The audience gave generous applause for her expressiveness and technique, remarkable for a 10-year-old. I still vividly remember Matthew's behavior then. His gaze toward his niece Lily, rather than his daughter Amy, was intensely passionate. As expected of someone with Walker family blood, he muttered to himself with a somewhat proud tone. His strange behavior continued at the post-recital reception. Among the relatives gathered around Lily, he stood with his sister Samantha, beaming. His expression was like a parent rejoicing in their own child's success. Meanwhile, Amy quietly watched her cousin's success from a distance. "Lily, that was truly wonderful. Looking forward to your future." With each word of praise thrown their way, Matthew and Samantha would exchange glances, sharing what seemed like secret smiles. Stephen, still caught up in work, arrived late to the reception. He showed no particular concern about his wife and brother-in-law's intimate conversation. But I could tell the abnormality of this atmosphere. It felt like someone was maintaining a big lie, creating a heavy atmosphere that enveloped the entire venue. As December began, preparations started for the annual Christmas party. This is a big family gathering traditionally held at our mansion. Relatives from across the East Coast gather to celebrate the year's end. This year, there was an unusual tension from the preparation stage. Matthew declared, "I want to make this year's party special," and started getting involved in preparations he usually left entirely to me. He checked the guest list multiple times and even hinted at having an important announcement. Those words filled my chest with a constricting feeling. Even while decorating the large Christmas tree, there was a different air than usual. While Amy and Lily were attaching ornaments together, Matthew and Samantha were having serious discussions about something. Every time their gazes fell on Lily, my anxiety increased. As party preparations reached their peak, the tension in the house increased day by day. What should have been an eagerly anticipated family gathering felt like everyone was afraid of something. Matthew in particular never let his mobile phone out of sight, frequently exchanging messages with Samantha. One night, fragments of their argument overheard from the study seemed like the key to solving all the mysteries. Matthew's voice saying, "We can't keep hiding this any longer." Samantha's voice pleading, "But think about the children." I was beginning to sense what their conversation meant. 1 week until the Christmas party. This annual gathering might significantly change our lives this year. Such a premonition enveloped the house like a heavy air. Christmas Eve morning brought soft light streaming through the crystal-clear winter sky. Though we should have been looking forward to this day as usual, this year only brought mounting anxiety. Many presents were already piled under the large Christmas tree, and the living room was filled with the scent of cinnamon and orange. After 3 p.m., relatives started gathering one after another. An uncle and aunt from Boston, cousins living in New York, relatives even came from as far as Chicago, making it a large gathering of over 30 people. The women were dressed in holiday-appropriate elegant dresses, and the men in proper suits. Cheerful laughter increasingly echoed through the mansion. The Samantha family arrived earlier than usual. Lily, dressed in a brand-new velvet dress, was carefully checking the piano tuning before the start. Meanwhile, Matthew was more restless than usual, repeatedly checking his mobile phone and going back and forth between the study and reception room. "Dad, are you nervous?" When Amy asked her father, Matthew showed an expression as if frozen for a moment. "Ah, a little," he answered with a slightly trembling voice. At 5 p.m., the party began as scheduled with Lily's piano performance. Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker further enhanced the Christmas atmosphere. The gathered relatives gave generous applause for her skillful performance, remarkable for a 10-year-old. As expected of Lily, truly wonderful. She's the pride of our family. Amidst the flying words of praise, I didn't miss how Matthew and Samantha's expressions stiffened for a moment. They kept exchanging glances and showing signs of checking the time. Next, dinner began in the main dining room. A long table was set with colorful dishes centered around roast turkey. Champagne in glasses reflected light and sparkled, while the fireplace cast warm light throughout the room. At first glance, everything looked like a perfect family gathering. However, as a veteran librarian, I could tell. With eyes that don't miss even the finest cracks in book spines, I could clearly sense the abnormal tension in the air. Matthew barely ate during dinner. Samantha similarly just poked at her food with her fork. Their behavior was clearly odd. Amy and Lily were enjoying themselves at the children's table with other cousins. Their occasional laughter felt like the only relief in this heavy atmosphere. It happened suddenly around the time the Christmas pudding was being served. Matthew abruptly stood up and lightly clinked his glass. "Everyone, may I have your attention for a moment?" Room conversation gradually quieted as all eyes focused on him. Samantha's face turned pale for a moment, and my heart started beating violently. "I have important news for everyone today." Matthew pulled out a piece of paper from his inner pocket with trembling hands. Though his eyes were red, he continued speaking while trying to maintain a dignified attitude. "For these past few months, I've been facing a certain fact. And now, I believe it's time to reveal the truth before this family." The sound of unfolding paper echoed through the silent room. Amy watched her father with a puzzled expression from the children's table. "Please look at these DNA test results." "Amy." Matthew's voice caught for a moment. "Amy is not my child." At that moment, the room's atmosphere seemed to freeze. Everyone held their breath, lost for words. Hands holding glasses stopped, and the sound of forks ceased. Amid this, the sound of a small chair creaking was heard. Amy had slowly stood up. Amy pointed straight at Lily and said in a clear voice through the tension-filled space of adults, "Did you test Lily's DNA too?" With that one line, the room's atmosphere changed completely. The paper slipped from Matthew's hands, and Samantha let out a small scream. Stephen looked at his wife with a confused expression, and murmurs spread among the other relatives. And I quietly smiled. My daughter's wise words were about to open the door to a truth that had been hidden for 10 years. Right after Amy's words broke the heavy silence, I slowly stood up. Placing the napkin I had been holding with trembling hands quietly on the table, I straightened my back and looked at my husband. The Christmas tree lights flickered along with the fireplace flames. "We knew everything." My voice was calmer than I expected. With hands that had handled thousands of books at the library, I took out an envelope from my bag. The edge of the white envelope was slightly worn from being checked many times. "These are the real DNA test results. Matthew, the ones you have are fake, aren't they? The results from the Boston lab, Greenwich General Hospital records, and 10 years of your email exchanges. They're all here." I could see the color draining from my husband's face. Samantha let out a small cry and covered her face with both hands. Stephen still didn't seem to fully grasp the situation. I had known the whole truth for a month. When my husband's behavior started becoming strange, my maternal instinct kicked in. With over 20 years of library experience, I had developed an eye for noticing subtle changes in people. After much deliberation, I decided to hire a reputable detective agency in New York. The facts revealed by that investigation would turn our lives upside down. I still vividly remember the day I received the first report from the detective, crying alone in the reading room after the library had closed. Matthew and Samantha's affair had begun in the summer of 2014, 10 years ago. While Stephen was away on a 3-month medical conference in Chicago, their relationship rapidly developed. The two siblings fell into a forbidden relationship. As a result of that relationship, Samantha became pregnant. Initially, they considered abortion. However, Matthew's strong desire not to give up his own child, combined with Samantha's wish to have this baby, led them to ultimately decide on cuckolding. Looking at the medical records from that time, Stephen had accepted Lily as his own child without any doubt. His love as a father after her birth was genuine, with evidence showing he tried to make time for his daughter whenever possible between his busy work schedule. "Stephen," I called out gently. "Haven't you noticed how much Lily looks like Matthew? Actually, she has the Walker family's genetic traits. Those characteristic blue eyes, that straight nose. And that piano talent is actually a trait passed down through Matthew's maternal lineage." Stephen froze as if struck by lightning. The weight of his wife and best friend's 10-year betrayal, and above all, the fact that his beloved daughter was actually. These revelations hit him all at once. Large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his hands wouldn't stop trembling. Still, his eyes held unchanged love when looking at Lily. Samantha collapsed into her chair. Her perfectly applied makeup began to run with her tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she began her tearful confession. "Last month, when a blood type discrepancy was found during Lily's regular checkup, Matthew and I were panicking, knowing everything would soon come to light. Matthew tried to get through this by denying his parental relationship with Amy. I'm truly sorry." While listening to this confession, I thought back to the events of a month ago. After receiving the detective's report and getting confirmation through DNA testing, the most difficult part was explaining the situation to Amy. "Hey, Amy," one night, I gently spoke while holding my daughter on my lap. "Mommy has something important to tell you about Daddy. It might be a bit difficult to understand, but I believe you can handle it." Amy understood the situation with surprising calmness. Rather, she even showed pure joy, asking, "So Lily and I are real sisters?" Then she said, "If Daddy is trying to do something bad, we need to stop him, right?" At those words, I couldn't help but hug my daughter tightly. Together, we made plans for this party. We had already predicted that Matthew would present fake DNA test results. Amy's wise words were the culmination of that plan. Matthew now leaned against the wall, looking defeated. His plan to divorce me in pursuit of a new life with his sister and even deny his relationship with his real daughter had crumbled helplessly. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled. Meanwhile, Lily quietly stood up and walked over to Stephen. Each of her steps echoed through the room. "Dad, you are my real dad." Regardless of genetics, you're the beloved father who raised me for 10 years. You will always be my dad." At those words, Stephen choked up and held his daughter tightly. A warm atmosphere spread around them. There was a parent-child bond there far stronger than any biological fact. Lily's decision deeply affected all of us. She clearly rejected a relationship with Matthew, her biological father, choosing instead Stephen, who had loved and raised her for 10 years. Her choice proved the existence of a genuine parent-child bond that transcended blood ties. The party naturally came to an end there. Relatives departed quietly, each harboring their own thoughts. The next day, many phone calls and messages arrived. It was a great comfort to us that most contained words of understanding and support rather than criticism or condemnation. A few days later, Stephen initiated divorce proceedings. He determined that his relationship with Samantha was beyond repair. However, his love for Lily never changed one bit. If anything, he began expressing it more strongly, saying, "You'll always be my precious daughter." I also decided to divorce Matthew. The 10-year betrayal and his attempt to deny even his bond with his real daughter were unforgivable. Divorce proceedings would begin early in the new year. Amy gripped my hand firmly, saying, "Mom, let's do our best together." The warmth of that small hand gave me the courage to look forward. I resolved to build a new life while continuing my library work. Most comforting was the relationship between Amy and Lily. As blood sisters, they became bound by an even stronger bond than before. They could always be seen together at school and their various activities. The sight of Amy reading while listening to Lily's piano practice warms my heart. The community support was also reassuring. My library colleagues, school teachers, and neighbors supported us in various ways. I was especially grateful for their consideration toward the children, from arranging counseling to providing subtle care in daily life. We experienced the kindness of many people. By the time we welcomed the new year, our lives had begun to regain some stability. Amy and I moved into a small apartment near the library and started our new life. My daughter still loves books, and we spend weekends at the library together. Sometimes Lily joins us, and we hold reading sessions together. Truth can sometimes be cruel, but it can also bring new beginnings. Now, the mother-daughter bond between Amy and me is stronger than ever. And through this experience, we learn that there are things more important than blood ties. As I organize books in the soft light streaming through the library windows today, I think, life, like a story, can sometimes take unexpected turns. But I feel truly blessed to be able to weave each page together with the people I cherish. Just like carefully aligning each book's spine on the shelf, we will walk forward into our new life, one step at a time, steadily and surely. I'm Hannah Collins, 34 years old, working as a part-time music teacher 3 days a week in a quiet residential neighborhood in Tampa, Florida. When I open my front door, the penetrating evening light streams into our Spanish-style home. My son Tommy's sneakers are carelessly left on the doormat. "Tommy, please arrange your shoes properly." As if in response to my voice, my 8-year-old son comes running down from the second floor. His soft hair bounces as he moves, and his large brown eyes sparkle brightly. "Sorry, Mom." Tommy apologizes sincerely and carefully arranges his shoes with his small hands. His pure gesture makes me smile involuntarily. Tommy is a sensitive and intuitive child. His caring and gentle nature must come from his father. I met my husband Daniel 6 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. He works as a middle manager at a local technology company. When we first met at the wedding, I was instantly drawn to his sincere personality. His neatly groomed black hair and gentle smile, but most of all, his natural consideration for others. We decided to get married just a year after meeting. I'm home. At 6 p.m., Daniel returns home at his usual time. His return marks the beginning of our family's precious daily routine. In the living room, Tommy starts working on his homework, while I put the finishing touches on dinner preparation. The savory aroma of grilled vegetables wafts from the kitchen. Is that grilled chicken? Smells wonderful. Daniel hugs me from behind. Even with fatigue visible on his face from work, his love for his family remains unchanged. However, lately I've been worried about the faint dark circles under his eyes. He seems to be under some stress after being passed over for a promotion. Hannah, my mother's coming tomorrow, Daniel mentions during dinner. His mother Eleanor has been visiting us frequently since she lost her husband 2 years ago. She maintains an outwardly refined demeanor, but her occasional fixation on money concerns me. Perhaps financial anxiety weighs heavily on her as she lives on her pension. Will Grandma look at my drawings again? Tommy asks excitedly. True, my mother-in-law is good at praising her grandson's artwork. But lately, I've noticed something anxious in Tommy's expression, especially before and after her visits. Oh, and Sarah's coming too. At the mention of my sister-in-law's name, I become lost in thought. Sarah is an influencer with about 50,000 followers on social media. Behind her flashy posts, I sense she might be dealing with some issues. Recently, she's been visiting our house more frequently. On weekends, we go on family picnics or watch new releases at the local theater. On the surface, we might seem like an ideal middle-class family. We live in a house with a pool in the backyard in the Hyde Park district. Our 2-car garage houses my compact SUV and Daniel's sedan. Sunday brunch barbecues in the backyard have become our tradition. But invisible shadows are creeping in. After father-in-law's death, a heavy atmosphere has settled over the Collins family. Daniel's behavior has been changing gradually too. I've been noticing the bluish glow of his computer more often late at night. As a music teacher, I have a good reputation among students and parents. Working 3 days a week was perfect for balancing family time. So when Daniel recently asked, "Have you considered switching to full-time?" I felt a bit confused. But what concerned me more was Tommy's change. Despite his typically bright and energetic personality, lately he sometimes shows a distant expression. He starts to say something, then closes his mouth. This gesture tugs at my heart. In our air-conditioned home, while cleaning up after dinner, I think. Life with my beloved family. Ordinary but genuine happiness. Yet beneath this daily life, some unseen darkness lurks. That premonition might have been a harbinger of the fate about to strike us. That portrait arrived at our home one Friday evening. It was past 7 p.m., later than usual, when Daniel stood at the entrance holding a large frame in both hands. Sweat beaded on his neck, and he had an unusually tense expression. A business contact gave it to me. They say it's a really valuable antique. The portrait illuminated by the entrance light showed what appeared to be a 19th century nobleman. A middle-aged man in a navy dress coat, wearing a cold smile beneath his well-groomed mustache. Don't you think it would be perfect on the living room's main wall? Daniel spoke with unusual enthusiasm. True, the painting might suit our cream-colored walls. But why suddenly bring home such an old-fashioned portrait? Questions crossed my mind, but considering his recent behavior, I thought perhaps he needed a change of pace. Dad, that painting. Tommy, coming down from upstairs, stopped in his tracks when he saw the portrait. His usually cheerful voice disappeared, and he fell silent after starting to say something. What do you think, Tommy? Isn't it nice? To Daniel's question, Tommy just nodded vaguely. That night, my son unusually barely touched his dinner. From the next day, the atmosphere in our house began to change gradually. The first thing I noticed was Tommy's change. He started avoiding the living room whether doing homework or watching TV. He insisted on studying at the dining table, and even when I suggested, "Isn't it brighter over there?" he would just shake his head. Then one night, "Mom, I need to go to the bathroom." Around midnight, Tommy knocked on my bedroom door. His small voice was trembling, and I jumped up immediately. "What's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" "No, it's just going through the living room." While gently patting Tommy's head as he looked down anxiously, I accompanied him to the bathroom. Both going and coming back, he wouldn't even glance toward the living room. The next day, a decisive event occurred. At 3 p.m., Tommy unusually started his homework on the living room sofa after returning from school. Just as I felt relieved thinking, "That's good, he's finally getting used to it," we heard the sound of a pencil dropping. "Mom." When I turned around, Tommy's face had turned pale. His small body was slightly trembling as he stared fixedly at the portrait. "That painting, it feels like it's watching us, it's scary." His confession in a trembling voice sent chills down my spine. But faced with my anxious son, I forced a smile. "Oh, that's just your imagination. It's only a painting." Though I brushed it off lightly, from that night, I started noticing things too. When I got up for water in the kitchen late at night, I thought I heard a faint mechanical sound. Like a camera shutter. As if to deny it was just imagination, the atmosphere in our house steadily changed. Eleanor and Sarah's visits suddenly increased. What particularly caught my attention was how they always had long conversations in the living room, stopping in front of the portrait as if checking something. "Hey, Mom, shouldn't we adjust the angle of this painting?" When Sarah reached for the portrait saying this, Eleanor hastily stopped her. "Oh, it's fine as it is. The lighting is just right." When I heard this conversation, something felt off. It was as if they were concerned about something other than the painting itself. Conversations in the house decreased. Daniel always went out to the terrace to take work calls, and Sarah never let go of her smartphone during visits. Even Eleanor's praise for her grandson's drawings started to sound hollow. And that mechanical sound at night. What I first thought was my imagination became increasingly clear. Especially in the quiet of night, from the direction of the portrait. But it would take a little more time before I realized what it really was. The mechanical sounds at night became more noticeable day by day. As if to prove that what I initially thought was my imagination actually existed. Especially when I could hear it clearly from the direction of the portrait in the middle of the night, it sent chills down my spine. Without telling my husband, I reported it to the police's cybercrime division. Surprisingly, the officer took my story seriously. We've been paying special attention lately to unusual behavior in security cameras and smart home devices. 3 days later, the police's special cybercrime investigation team visited our home. The technical team carefully scanned the entire living room with their equipment. When they stopped in front of the portrait, their detector showed a sharp response. We're detecting the latest wireless network. May we examine this portrait? Behind the carefully removed portrait, the police discovered a small camera system. The high-performance wireless camera was connected to our Wi-Fi and had been transmitting encrypted video to overseas servers. This is a very sophisticated system. Professional-level setup. With the technical team's report, the investigation progressed rapidly. IP address tracking identified the streaming site's operator. What was revealed was shocking beyond my imagination. 24 hours with the ideal family. That was the name of the stream that had been selling our family's privacy. On a subscription-based streaming site, about 300,000 people worldwide had been watching. A portion of the monthly fees became revenue, about $8,000 per month. When I learned this fact, everything went black before my eyes. As the investigation continued, a deeper darkness emerged. It had all started with my father-in-law who passed away 2 years ago. An old ledger discovered during a police search of Eleanor's home revealed the whole story. After retirement, my father-in-law had gotten involved in real estate investment. However, most were illegal investment schemes, and after repeated failures, he had accumulated about $500,000 in debt. Moreover, loans from loan sharks had outrageous annual interest rates of 20%, and his days were spent struggling with repayment. Then his sudden death. With life insurance unpaid, only the enormous debt remained, and its pressure had driven the whole family into a corner. Furthermore, it was revealed that Daniel had been experiencing serious workplace harassment at his company. After missing out on promotion, perhaps from desperation, he tried personal investments but failed. He had accumulated new debt of $150,000, impossible to repay with just his salary. Sarah's situation was also serious. Her income as an influencer had rapidly decreased, and major brand contracts were suddenly terminated. Credit card payments fell behind, and her debt had grown to $80,000. Eleanor was also cornered. Her pension alone couldn't sustain her lifestyle, and she was struggling to pay increasing medical bills. She was even at risk of losing the house she had lived in for many years. That's when they came up with this streaming plan. The streaming site's management screen was found on Daniel's computer, revealing he had handled everything from camera installation to streaming system setup using advanced technology. Sarah's social media accounts contained numerous records of secret promotion to followers worldwide. Most shocking was the meticulous revenue record found at Eleanor's home. How to distribute the monthly revenue, how much to allocate to debt repayment. Like a household account book, it recorded in detail the profits from selling our lives. Why involve Tommy too? To my question, Sarah confessed tearfully. That's what viewers wanted. The image of a perfect family. They said it had no value unless we showed everything, 24/7, 365 days. At that moment, something completely broke inside me. Even my son's changing clothes and bath time. Even our bedroom privacy. All trust and love for family shattered. The footage had been streamed worldwide, exposed to the eyes of 300,000 strangers. All for just $8,000 a month. Our dignity had been trampled by family members blinded by money. In a small conference room at the police station, I was shown the footage. The large monitor displayed our family's daily life. In the footage, edited like a documentary, we had unknowingly been made to play the role of a perfect family. Breakfast time. A scene where Tommy spills cereal and I gently wipe it up. An afternoon holiday, the family enjoying board games. Although these were supposed to be our natural life moments, the footage cut for unknown viewers, consumption, somehow looked distorted. This is. As I lost words, the footage continued. Scenes of Tommy changing after returning from school. Innocent water play during bath time. As chills ran down my spine, the police officer continued explaining quietly. These videos were specially edited and distributed to paid members. At that moment, the conference room door opened, and Daniel, Sarah, and Eleanor were brought in accompanied by police officers. Their expressions showed something like resignation, as if they had given up. Why? To my question, Daniel was the first to speak. To repay the debts. We had no other choice. Those words sounded like hollow echoes from far away. Everyone yearns for the ideal family, Sarah continued. We just showed them that dream. What's wrong with providing what many people want? Eleanor also spoke quietly but with unwavering voice. It was either this or bankruptcy for the whole family. You wouldn't understand. What it's like being chased by debt collectors every day. Those words definitively broke something inside me. You're right, I don't understand. Why you would ruin my son's life for money. How you could so easily sell our privacy. My voice gradually grew louder. Tommy is only 8 years old. How do you think he'll feel when he learns about this in the future? What if his school friends find out? What if he learns as an adult that footage of his childhood was spread worldwide? As the air in the conference room froze, I stood up. We are not a spectacle. With that cry, my hand reached for the portrait placed among the evidence on the table. I lifted the heavy frame and slammed it to the floor with all my strength. From the frame that shattered with a loud noise, an emotionless camera lens looked up at me. The sight seemed to symbolize the true nature of the family that had been deceiving us. Over the next few weeks, legal proceedings moved forward rapidly. Daniel, Eleanor, and Sarah were arrested on charges of child privacy violation and illegal video distribution. I immediately initiated divorce proceedings and filed for sole custody of Tommy. Meetings with lawyers continued almost daily. There was more than enough evidence, and compensation claims were certain to be approved. But money was secondary. All I needed now was to start a new life with just Tommy and me. Mom, are we moving? While packing boxes, Tommy asked anxiously. Leaving Tampa for another city in Florida. I had decided we would start living somewhere new, unknown to anyone. Yes, we're starting a new life in a new place. Will anyone be watching us like at the old house? At that question, I stopped packing and held Tommy tightly. Never. I promise. 3 months into our new life in a new city. The school where I had been working part-time welcomed me as a full-time teacher. Though busy with 5-day full-time work, it's fulfilling. Above all, the time spent with students seems to be gradually healing my emotional wounds. Our new home is on the second floor of an old apartment building. No pool in the yard, no two-car garage. But in this compact space, I feel a definite sense of security. No surveillance cameras, no smart home systems. Just a quiet life where only Tommy's and my breathing can be heard. Mom, look. On a holiday afternoon, Tommy showed me a picture he drew at school. A landscape painted in bright colors. A big sun in the sky, colorful flowers on the ground. And two figures holding hands. This is me and Mom. Tommy's face showed an innocent smile I hadn't seen in a while. Seeing that smile makes my heart warm. This is our new normal. A truly free life, unseen by anyone. What a beautiful picture. I smiled along with Tommy. Looking at my son's picture hung on the wall, I vowed in my heart that we would continue walking together, step by step. Never again would our lives be sold for someone else's desires. In this small home, we're building genuine happiness. Perhaps this is the form of a perfect family that money can never buy.